Ion by Plato, translated by Benjamin Jowett.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org.
Persons of the dialogue: Socrates, Ion. Socrates: Welcome, Ion. Are you from your native city of Ephesus? Ion: No, Socrates, but from Epidaurus, where I attended the festival of Asclepius. Socrates: And do the Epidaurians have a contest of rhapsodes at the festival? Ion: Oh yes, and of all sorts of musical performers. Socrates: And were you one of the competitors? And did you succeed? Ion: I obtained the first prize of all, Socrates. Socrates: Well done, and I hope that you will do the same for us at the Panathenaea. Ion: And I will, please heaven. Socrates: I often envy the profession of a rhapsode, Ion, for you have always to wear fine clothes, and to look as beautiful as you can is a part of your art. Then again, you are obliged to be continually in the company of many good poets, especially of Homer, who is the best and most divine of them, and to understand him, and not merely learn his words by rote, is a thing greatly to be envied. And no man can be a rhapsode who does not understand the meaning of the poet, for the rhapsode ought to interpret the mind of the poet to his hearers. But how can he interpret him well unless he knows what he means? All this is greatly to be envied. Ion: Very true, Socrates. Interpretation has certainly been the most laborious part of my art, and I believe myself able to speak about Homer better than any man, and that neither Metrodorus of Lampsacus, nor Stesimbrotus of Thasos, nor Glaucon, nor anyone else who ever was, had as good ideas about Homer as I have, or as many. Socrates: I am glad to hear you say so, Ion. I see that you will not refuse to acquaint me with them. Ion: Certainly, Socrates, and you really ought to hear how exquisitely I render Homer. I think that Homeridae should give me a golden crown. Socrates: I shall take the opportunity of hearing your embellishments of him at some other time. Just now I should like to ask you a question. Does your art extend to Hesiod and Archilochus, or to Homer only? Ion: To Homer only.
He in himself is quite enough.
Socrates: Are there many things about which Homer and Hesiod agree? Ion: Yes, in my opinion there are a good many. Socrates: And can you interpret better what Homer says, or what Hesiod says, about these matters in which they agree? Ion: I can interpret them equally well, Socrates, where they agree. Socrates: But what about matters in which they do not agree? For example, about divination, of which both Homer and Hesiod have something to say. Ion: Very true. Socrates: Would you or a good prophet be a better interpreter of what these two poets say about divination, not only when they agree, but when they disagree? Ion: A prophet. Socrates: And if you were a prophet, would you not be able to interpret them when they disagree as well as when they agree? Ion: Clearly. Socrates: But how did you come to have this skill about Homer only, and not about Hesiod or the other poets? Does not Homer speak of the same themes which all the other poets handle? Is not war his great argument? And does not he speak of human society, and of intercourse of men, good and bad, skilled and unskilled, and of the gods conversing with one another and with mankind, and about what happens in heaven and in the world below, and the generations of gods and heroes, are not these the themes of which Homer sings? Ion: Very true, Socrates. Socrates: And do not the other poets sing of the same? Ion: Yes, Socrates, but not in the same way as Homer. Socrates: What, in a worse way? Ion: Yes, in a far worse. Socrates: And Homer in a better way? Ion: He is incomparably better. Socrates: And yet surely, my dear friend Ion, in a discussion about arithmetic, where many people are speaking, and one speaks better than the rest, there is somebody who can judge which of them is the good speaker. Ion: Yes. Socrates: And he who judges the good will be the same as he who judges of the bad speakers? Ion: The same. Socrates: And will he be the arithmetician? Ion: Yes. Socrates: Well, and in discussion about the wholesomeness of food, when many persons are speaking, and one speaks better than the rest, will he who recognizes the better speaker be a different person from he who recognizes the worse, or the same? Ion: Clearly the same. Socrates: And who is he, and what is his name? Ion: The physician. Socrates: And speaking generally, in all discussions in which the subject is the same, and many men are speaking, will not he who knows the good know the bad speaker also? For if he does not know the bad, neither will he know the good when the same topic is being discussed. Ion: True. Socrates: Is not the same person skillful in both? Ion: Yes. Socrates: And you say that Homer and the other poets, such as Hesiod and Archilochus, speak of the same things, although not in the same way, but the one speaks well, and the other not so well. Ion: Yes, and I am right in saying so. Socrates: And if you knew the good speaker, you would also know the inferior speakers to be inferior. Ion: That is true. Socrates: Then, my dear friend, can I be mistaken in saying that Ion is equally skilled in Homer and in other poets, since he himself acknowledges that the same person will be a good judge of all those who speak of the same things, and that almost all poets do speak of the same things? Ion: Why then, Socrates, do I lose attention and go to sleep, and have absolutely no ideas of the least value when anyone speaks of any other poet? But when Homer is mentioned, I wake up at once, and am all attention, and have plenty to say. Socrates: The reason, my friend, is obvious. No one can fail to see that you speak of Homer without any art or knowledge. If you were able to speak of him by rules of art, you would have been able to speak of all other poets, for poetry is a whole. Ion: Yes. Socrates: And when anyone acquires any other art as a whole, the same may be said of them.
Would you like me to explain my meaning, Ion?
Ion: Yes, indeed, Socrates. I very much wish that you would, for I love to hear you wise men talk. Socrates: Oh, that we were wise, Ion, and that you could truly call us so. But you rhapsodes and actors, and the poets whose verses you sing, are wise, whereas I am a common man who only speak the truth. For consider what a very commonplace and trivial thing it is which I have said, a thing which any man might say, that when a man has acquired a knowledge of a whole art, the inquiry into good and bad is one and the same. Let us consider this matter. Is not the art of painting a whole? Ion: Yes.
Socrates: And there are, and have been, many painters, good and bad? Ion: Yes.
Socrates: And did you ever know anyone who was skillful in pointing out the excellences and defects of Polygnotus, the son of Aglaophon, but incapable of criticizing other painters, and when the work of any other painter was produced, went to sleep, and was at a loss, and had no ideas, but when he had to give his opinion about Polygnotus, or whoever the painter might be, and about him only, woke up and was attentive and had plenty to say? Ion: No, indeed, I have never known such a person. Socrates: Or did you ever know anyone in sculpture who was skillful in expounding the merits of Daedalus, the son of Mitian, or of Epius, the son of Panopeus, or of Theodorus the Samian, or of any individual sculptor, but when the works of sculptors in general were produced, was at a loss, and went to sleep, and had nothing to say? Ion: No, indeed, no more than the other. Socrates: And if I am not mistaken, you never met with anyone among flute players, or harp players, or singers to the harp, or rhapsodes, who was able to discourse on Olympus, or Thamyris, or Orpheus, or Pimeus, the rhapsode of Ithaca, but was at a loss when he came to speak of Ion of Ephesus, and had no notion of his merits or defects? Ion: I cannot deny what you say, Socrates. Nevertheless, I am conscious in my own self, and the world agrees with me in thinking that I do speak better and have more to say about Homer than any other man. But I do not speak equally well about others. Tell me the reason of this. Socrates: I perceive, Ion, and I will proceed to explain to you what I imagine to be the reason of this. The gift which you possess of speaking excellently about Homer is not an art, but, as I was just saying, an inspiration. There is a divinity moving you, like that contained in the stone which Euripides calls a magnet, but which is commonly known as the stone of Heraclea. This stone not only attracts iron rings, but also imparts to them a similar power of attracting other rings, and sometimes you may see a number of pieces of iron and rings suspended from one another, so as to form quite a long chain, and all of them derive their power of suspension from the original stone. In like manner, the Muse first of all inspires men herself, and from these inspired persons a chain of other persons is suspended who take the inspiration. For all good poets, epic as well as lyric, compose their beautiful poems not by art, but because they are inspired and possessed. And as the Corbantian revelers, when they dance, are not in their right mind, so the lyric poets are not in their right mind when they are composing their beautiful strains, but when falling under the power of music and meter, are inspired and possessed. Like Bacchic maidens, who draw milk and honey from the rivers when they are under the influence of Dionysus, but not when they are in their right mind. And the soul of the lyric poet does the same, as they themselves say, for they tell us that they bring songs from honeyed fountains, culling them out of the gardens and dells of the Muses. They, like bees, winging their way from flower to flower. And this is true, for the poet is a light and winged and holy thing, and there is no invention in him until he has been inspired and is out of his senses, and the mind is no longer in him. When he has not attained to this state, he is powerless and is unable to utter his oracles. Many are the noble words in which poets speak concerning the actions of men. But like yourself when speaking about Homer, they do not speak of them by any rules of art. They are simply inspired to utter that to which the muse impels them, and that only. And when inspired, one of them will make dithyrambs, another hymns of praise, another choral strains, another epic or iambic verses. And he who is good at one is not good at any other kind of verse. For not by art does the poet sing, but by power divine. Had he learned by rules of art, he would have known how to speak not of one theme only, but of all. Therefore God takes away the minds of poets, and uses them as his ministers, as he also uses diviners and holy prophets, in order that we who hear them may know them to be speaking, not of themselves, who utter these priceless words in a state of unconsciousness, but that God himself is the speaker, and that through him he is conversing with us. Antiochus the Chalcidian affords a striking instance of what I am saying. He wrote nothing that anyone would care to remember, but the famous paean which is in everyone's mouth, one of the finest poems ever written, simply an invention of the Muses, as he himself says. For in this way the god would seem to indicate to us, and not allow us to doubt, that these beautiful poems are not human, or the work of man, but divine and the work of God, and that the poets are only the interpreters of the gods by whom they are severally possessed. Was not this the lesson which the god intended to teach, when by the mouth of the worst of poets he sang the best of songs? Am I not right, Ion? Ion: Yes, indeed, Socrates, I feel that you are, for your words touch my soul, and I am persuaded that good poets, by a divine inspiration, interpret the things of the gods to us. Socrates: And you rhapsodists are the interpreters of the poets. Ion: There again you are right. Socrates: Then you are the interpreters of the interpreters. Ion: Precisely. Socrates: I wish you would frankly tell me, Ion, what I am going to ask of you. When you produce the greatest effect upon the audience in the recitation of some striking passage, such as the apparition of Odysseus, leaping forth on the floor, recognized by the suitors, and casting his arrows at his feet, or the description of Achilles rushing at Hector, or the sorrows of Andromache, Hecuba, or Priam, are you in your right mind? Are you not carried out of yourself? And does not your soul, in an ecstasy, seem to be among the persons or places of which you are speaking, whether they are in Ithaca or in Troy, or whatever may be the scene of the poem? Ion: That proof strikes home to me, Socrates, for I must frankly confess that at the tale of pity my eyes are filled with tears, and when I speak of horrors my hair stands on end and my heart throbs. Socrates: Well, Ion, and what are we to say of a man who at a sacrifice or festival, when he is dressed in holiday attire and has golden crowns upon his head, of which nobody has robbed him, appears weeping or panic-stricken in the presence of more than 20,000 friendly faces, when there is no one despoiling or wronging him? Is he in his right mind, or is he not? Ion: No, indeed, Socrates, I must say that, strictly speaking, he is not in his right mind. Socrates: And are you aware that you produce similar effects on most of the spectators? Ion: only too well, for I look down upon them from the stage, and behold the various emotions of pity, wonder, sternness, stamped upon their countenances when I am speaking, and I am obliged to give my very best attention to them, for if I make them cry, I myself shall laugh, and if I make them laugh, I myself shall cry when the time of payment arrives. Socrates: do you know that the spectator is the last of the rings, which, as I am saying, receive the power of the original magnet from one another? The rhapsode, like yourself, and the actor are intermediate links, and the poet himself is the first of them. Through all these, the god sways the souls of men in any direction which he pleases, and makes one man hang down from another. Thus there is a vast chain of dancers and masters and undermasters of choruses, who are suspended, as from the stone, at the side of the rings which hang down from the muse. And every poet has some muse from whom he is suspended, and by whom he is said to be possessed, which is nearly the same thing, for he is taken hold of. And from these first rings, which are the poets, depend others, some deriving their inspiration from Orpheus, others from Musaeus, but the greater number are possessed and held by Homer, of whom, Ion, you are one, and are possessed by Homer. And when anyone repeats the words of another poet, you go to sleep, and know not what to say. But when anyone recites a strain of Homer, you wake up in a moment, and your soul leaps within you, and you have plenty to say. For not by art or knowledge about Homer do you say what you say, but by divine inspiration and by possession, just as the Corybantian revelers, too, have a quick perception of that strain only which is appropriated to the god by whom they are possessed, and have plenty of dances and words for that, but take no heed of any other. And you, Ion, when the name of Homer is mentioned, have plenty to say, and have nothing to say of others. You ask, why is this? The answer is that you praise Homer not by art, but by divine inspiration. Ion: that is good, Socrates, and yet I doubt whether you will ever have eloquence enough to persuade me that I praise Homer only when I am mad and possessed. And if you could hear me speak of him, I'm sure you would never think this to be the case. Socrates: I should like very much to hear you, but not until you have answered a question which I have to ask. On what part of Homer do you speak well? Not surely about every part. Ion: there is no part, Socrates, about which I do not speak well. Of that I can assure you. Socrates: surely not about things in Homer of which you have no knowledge. Ion: and what is there in Homer of which I have no knowledge? Socrates: why, does not Homer speak in many passages about arts? For example, about driving. If I can only remember the lines, I will repeat them. Ion: I remember and will repeat them. Socrates: tell me then what Nestor says to Antilochus, his son, where he bids him to be careful of the turn at the horse race in honor of Patroclus. Ion: bend gently, he says, in the polished chariot to the left of them.